I have a little story for you and then a question. Okay?
Oh.
So when I was a student here, okay, I studied with Dr. Sokol, Vladimir Sokol. I don't know if I told you this story, but and so after this one concert, he came up to me and says, "What do you think? How'd you like this?" And as a teenager, I said, "Yeah, it's too fast, too slow, too loud, too soft." He says, "Yeah, that's all fine, but did you hear the music?"
That's
right. So, and I go, that's a novel idea. What's the point, right? And so from that point on, I kind of had to reassess. How do I listen to music? We in this profession, in the music profession, listen different ways. There are different reasons how we approach them. So I have a kind of a threefold question for you. How do you listen to music? I mean, for pleasure. I know you adjudicate all the time in the competitions, and also auditioning people here. How do you approach that? It's a different type of listening. And then working with students.
Gee, that's a fantastic question. And I've been interviewed many times, but I've never actually been asked it so specifically. People will often ask me, "What you're in auditions, what is it that you're listening for?" But the different kinds of listening. I think the thread in any kind of listening is that it starts with, does it touch you? Does it go to your heart? Does something move you? So, last night I went to the Philly Orchestra, Jill Shaham playing the William Walton Concerto. He moved me. It's am I sitting there listening to it in a certain kind of way? I would say when I go to concerts, certainly instrumental concerts or orchestral concerts, I probably am going more clean than if I'm going to the opera. My soul is cleaner, I think, because I'm not going to be quite maybe so, I don't know if critical is that. I'm more open in certain ways, I would say. When I'm listening to singers, again, I think the criteria of being touched is very big for me. I mean, I listen to close to 500 singers coming to audition for Curtis. Some people would say, well, when you first hear them, what is it that? And I said, it can. A 17-year-old can touch you also, and that has to happen. There's, I have a wonderful student here who's now in her 5th year, Sarah Schaefer. She came. I don't think she would mind me saying that she was very sort of plain when she walked in, what I would say. And then she sang a Schubert song. She was not sophisticated. She didn't know very much. She was 17. But she made me cry. She sang Du bist der Ruhe, and at the end, I was crying. And I invite singers, I allow the singers to come in, the singers that are in the department to come, and it turned out that they were crying. Many of them were crying also. So you sort of then think to yourself, but I have to take her. I have to take her, because if somebody can do that to me, and it's unsophisticated, there's not any real training involved there, then
you can't buy that.
You cannot buy that. She didn't buy it anywhere. She didn't. She comes from State College, actually. Her parents are musicians, so she came from a musical background. She didn't. It's the way she's put together, wired, whatever you want to call it. And that has been part of what I've been very conscious of developing and not taking away from her. Not to sort of be. And indeed, she does Sangi Domineo, Ilya, and she still has that wonderful, and that's what people react to. When I go and adjudicate, I would say that's the first, it has to be the first instinct, does this person move me? I mean, if we get rid of that and start talking about the tonal quality, or they don't do that, or the language is terrible, whatever, and so on, and starting with that, if we start with that, I think we're in trouble. We need to start with is it emotionally moving to me? So I go to a lot of concerts, a lot of music. In Vienna, I spent my life every night. When people ask me, what is your education if you didn't go to college or conservatory and so on, I said, well, I went to Vienna, I had a fantastic teacher, practiced 8 hours a day, worked with some singers, and went to the opera every night for 5 years. So that means I saw, 300 times 5, 1,500 performances, live, unlike now one gets to sound like an old fart. that when we have to
You're actually in the
establish that it
theater.
is live, but you're actually in the theater listening
Right.
to people make it happen. You know,
Right.
the biggest education there is to do.
Sure.
You're subconsciously learning. You know, I didn't know anything about singing and so on. I just knew I loved it, but and I recognized voices, but I didn't know what it was I was listening for. But then you slowly realize. I did not realize when I came to Curtis, I mean, everything is kind of a fluke, that when I was 42, I think, when I came, 41, 42, when Grafman asked me to come, I didn't know that I had a gift to identify young singers, that to be able to listen to a young singer and say, I think there's something there, I think we can develop that. It turns out that I do have that gift, because that's what I've been doing here for 25 years. I didn't know it in the beginning. It was purely like, and I still think it's like an instinct. It's like a thing. You can't really put your finger on it.
I'm curious. Do you also do you find it's important in your audition? Do you talk to?
Well, I used to. Interesting.
What I mean is, like, do you interview an individual to see?
Well, the singers that got into the finals, yes, I used to. But there, I stopped doing that a few years ago. I guess I kind of thought, look, they're sitting there with me. They're doing everything possible. They've already sung. So the things that I want to know about them, they're not going to tell me. Like, for example, are you an axe murderer? They're not going to sit there. Yes, I like killing people in my spare time, and then I come home and sing Mozart. They're not going to tell me that, or whatever their promise are. So I kind of stopped doing that and went on my own instinct about the singing, the music making. I think when you start talking with them in that situation, is sort of to find out what kind of person will they fit in and so on. You can't actually. And it turns out that actually some of the most wonderful musicians, some of the most greatest composers, some of the most fantastic bands, they were rotten human beings. So, I mean, if somebody had interviewed them first, who knows what would have happened.
I don't think I'll award you that offer.
Exactly. So, no, I don't do, it's a few years now that I don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah. We wait and go purely by the
I sometimes sit and when I listen to people audition, I guess more competitions. I'm just kind of ask one question. Do I want to buy a ticket to hear this person? So it kind of, I'm, from an audience standpoint, so it addresses, does it move me?
Yeah, exactly.
Does it move me to?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in the audition process, and we have finals, so they get to sing again, is this first part, do I want to hear them again? Exactly. And there are many people that come, and I'm sure that's true in the instrumental department, of course, also as it is in singing. We have the biggest load of applications. I mean, it's been overwhelming in the last years. There are lots of people that they have a little gift. You don't know if they have the discipline, but there's sometimes you can, like with Sarah Schaefer, I knew. There was something about her, and you can't pinpoint, you can't...
You just
and
know.
the other thing is, as you probably know also, in the instrumental world, that not everybody is supposed to do this. Just because you have a gift doesn't mean that you're supposed to do it. And I think there's a lot of lying that takes place in encouragement. And I think actually it's kind of an American thing. I was not born in this country. I wasn't reared in this country. So I think I can say that I'm very European in certain ways, and that's my background. Is that I think the wonderful thing about America is that there's always hope. There's a hopefulness in this country, I think. But there's also hope. You can do anything. No, you can't. I think that sometimes that lying, or whatever you want to call it, of telling to somebody, you can do anything you want, it's not actually true. And sometimes can cause young people a lot of trouble. Like they have a smaller talent, and then they spend 4 years paying a lot of money tuition, and they find out, well, actually, I'm not going to become a pianist, I'm not going to become a singer, I'm not going to become a cellist or whatever and so on. I mean, that's the luxury of being at Curtis, of course. It is a luxury institution. It is an elitist institution. It's an extraordinary institution that is. We are not guided by tuition, first of all, because it's tuition free.
Right.
So, if, for example, in auditions, which we just had now for the, we've gone through the whole process. I don't want to take anybody. There is no one saying to me that I have to, which is again a luxury. There's not somebody says you have to take in 5 people because we need that and so on. So I am, and we who work here at Curtis, we have everybody always says wherever I go, oh, but you have this situation, you can do whatever you want. Well, you can't do whatever you want, but in that case, I don't have to do what other schools do in that way there. I think there are way too many people being educated. Way, way too many. Who are being told they could possibly have a shot at it. I think the world is... I don't know when it was like when you were at school. I mean, there are way more people at school now that are across the country, and huge departments in universities of music that...
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different world. I mean, I grew up here pretty much at Curtis, so I mean that's what I know. And but yeah, I mean there are different approaches. I suppose different schools have different opportunities for people. But it has always been very, very selective and extremely competitive here. There's no question about it. But not only that it's competitive to get in, but each one of us
to get out.
We're on probation the entire enrollment, so people have to maintain the level that is expected. Period. So and I think that. That's all part of the parcel. Maybe people do forget, but you can't forget. It's just very, very true. And so to wrap this up, I'm just, this is a great conversation. This is wonderful. So 25 years of great success. Give me a glimpse into the future. I'm not talking about another 25 years, but what's the road? What's some of the things that you see that you'll be doing the next few years?
That's a very good question also. As Curtis now, as we are in 2011, and in August 2011, the new building, which is a monumental, fantastic, amazing accomplishment, I think, that this school has done. It will shift the I don't want to say mission of the school, because I think the mission of the school, which is to make the best artists and musicians possible. But as we know it, as you know it, as certainly longer than I have, because you were a student here, but and as I know it as a faculty member, for 25 years, things will change. I find myself at this point in my life being much more involved with other aspects of the school besides the opera and voice department, being part of artistic committees and I find it very interesting. I find the overall picture very interesting. I feel that I can contribute to how the shaping of that can take place. We have a new dean who comes from a much more academic background than any of us, and certainly me, since I have none. And in a weird way, I want to say, which is very interesting to me, that it was fate that hooked me up with Curtis, because the mission of Curtis is so much what I was already doing. You just, how did I learn how to be a coach? How to be you just get up and you do it, and that's how you learn it. And of course, that has been what it's been like here. So it was I would say it was like a glove that just came onto the hand, as far as I'm concerned. And I would probably say that one of the things that I would feel that I might have a voice in is to make sure that continues. That yes, we have academics here, we have a world available to students, but it's for me, still. So I remember a student in a master class somewhere, I don't know where it was, in Europe somewhere maybe. We were talking about Dichterliebe of Schumann, this wonderful, wonderful song cycle about being dumped, actually. Fantastic 40-minute long piece. I was taught, the poet to the words was Heinrich Heine, who was a weirdo. A weirdo. I mean, a Jew who went to Paris and then kind of stayed in bed for many years, but was a satirist and a wonderful, wonderful poet. I would say he was an inventor of cynical poetry in many ways. I remember talking about him to the singer, saying, "Do you know anything about him? Maybe it would be interesting to know." And he said something which, of course, on the one hand, one could say, well, that's awful to say. And then the other hand, like, well, I don't know. Which is, do you think it makes any difference when I sing if I know anything about Heine? And I think that's a very, very interesting question. When you look at the great pianists, for example, of the last 100 years, so there was a book called The Kunststimme and the Diva-Stimmes. So one could say there's the Kunstpianist and the Kunstpianist and the virtue and the finger. We like to think that Schnabel, for example, would sit and read Goethe would be deep and then play Beethoven, all 32, millions of wrong notes, but wonderfully, just wonderfully,
but beautiful, right?
But beautifully. But then there were other people, Horowitz might come to mind, that in spite of his Picassos on the wall, maybe that's not really where his world lay, and yet he was one of the great pianists of the world. Argerich, there is maybe. I know a lot of opera singers. I've worked with a lot of very famous opera singers. It's always surprising to me. I remember the first time I met Pavarotti, for example, that I think his interest in food was infinitely bigger than his interest in any, should we say, or learning to read music, but in any intellectual, and yet he will go down as one of the great singers of the 20th century. It's this balancing thing is a very interesting thing. I talk with my singers about these because I myself do know who Heine is, and I've read him and so on, not because I went to school, by the way,
right,
but because I was interested. And maybe that's the most interesting thing to me, that to encourage people to be curious about, well, who wrote these words? I mean, I say about Da Ponte, Lorenzo da Ponte, who wrote the three Figaro and Don Giovanni and Così, that, he used to walk the streets of Philadelphia. People would say, what do you mean he walked the streets? Well, didn't you know that he actually lived in Philadelphia? He came to America and he started off here. He had a store, he had his wife here, blah, blah. And he did. I said, well, you could have found that out too, but you don't need actually to go to school for that.
Right.
It depends on, like,
well,
if you
the
look,
key word is curiosity.
There's curiosity.
Right. Yeah.
And that part I'm very interested in egging these kids on. You have to be curious. There's a poster in the office, which I've had hanging there now for 25 years. Most people don't notice it because I don't know why. It's a big, huge photograph of Einstein. And I saw it somewhere 24 years ago. And I thought, and I got it and I had it framed and hung it up in the office. And people would come in and say, why do you have Einstein? Well, read the little inscription that it says at the bottom. And what does Einstein say? In small words at the bottom of the poster, imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think as the quote, or whatever you want to call it, for my department, I think I can't give them more than that. Because I actually think, as a musician and as an artist, imagination, the bottom line is imagination is more important than knowledge. Because you can have tons of knowledge, who gives a shit? But if you have no imagination to go with it...
Fantastic. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank
I hope
you.
we can talk again like this.
Absolutely.
Do another session.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.